For your cup project, you're going to make 3 cups and 3 tumblers on the wheel. Now, basically, cups and tumblers are just cylinders you've thrown and altered in a creative or beautiful but still functional sort of way. Cups are generally 3.5 to 5 inches tall, and tumblers are generally considered to be 5 to 7 inches tall. So I'm going to expect the same for your 3 cups and your 3 tumblers. Now let's get started talking about different ways you can alter your cups on the wheel. For your cups and tumblers, I recommend starting with 1.5 to 2 pounds of clay for your tumbler, and you can do maybe 1 pound to 1.5 pounds for your cup. And you're going to start just by throwing a regular cylinder. Alright, so I've thrown a cylinder. This is probably about 6 or 7 inches tall, so that's the size for a tumbler. And I've got about 1/2 inch of clay in the bottom. So that's enough for trimming. And now I want to start thinking about how to shape it. Now you can use your hands or your tools to shape it. And I'm going to think about I'm going to show you two ways. One way to make it curve in and one way to make it curve out. All right? So to make your cup curve in, you can start by really gently using your fingers to collar it in. So I'm using my fingers kind of like to pinch the clay in. And I'm just going to very slowly, kind of like I'm pulling, move my hands up. I might even move it down, and you can already see from the side that the clay is starting to curve in. Alright? And then same thing, if you want that opposite effect, if you want the clay to punch out or curve out, like in a convex kind of way, you can use your hands on the inside. So my outside hand isn't doing anything, it's just kind of there for support and guidance to keep my inside hand steady. And I'm just using the pads of my fingers to coax that clay outward. And so you can see how that clay is getting some volume there. Now you can also do this with a rib, and I think a rib is a nice way to kind of even out those curves and make them nice and smooth. So I'm just going to take, right now I'm using my rubber rib. You could also use a wooden rib for this. And I'm just going to press it into the clay. Ever so slightly, right? Gently increasing pressure. And you can see how that's really smoothing that curve. And same thing, so I could use the rib on the inside of the cup, right, to push that curve outward. And I can also use the rib, since it's flexible, I can curve it on the outside and press the clay out to meet the rib. So the rib is just holding steady and I'm pushing the clay into it from the inside. And that can help smooth the curve too. And so essentially, you're going to make interesting cup forms using any combination of these convex and concave curves. What we're thinking about here are the contours, right? So the contour is this outer line that we see. And then also the functionality of the cup, right? We want it to be a good user experience. So, part of that comes from making sure your walls are an even 1/4 of an inch all the way up. And then also consider the lip where people will be drinking from. So I usually like to finish up my lips just with a little slight pinch, just to thin it a little bit so that it's not like some big chunky thing that's harder to drink from. I think it's easier to drink from a thinner lip, right? And then of course, I'm going to just prepare the bottom, whether you are trimming a foot into it or you're going to leave it a flat bottom. You still want to use your throwing stick to make that nice bevel. That's one way to alter a cylinder to make a cup. So your cups and tumblers are an opportunity for you to consider creative ways to address functionality. So um, you might think about what are creative ways that you can make this an interesting user experience, perhaps through the grip or through, so that's the way the user interacts with it or holds it. Or you could think about the aesthetic experience, right? Like what are the curves and the contours doing? Um, so, I encourage you with at least a couple of your cups to try something creative and really unique. And see what all your tools and your hands can do. So for example, I might want to kind of make mine into a bubble grip, which I don't think that's the technical term for it, that's just what I'm calling it. So I'm going to give it kind of a narrower foot and a curve right through there. And then here, about where you would hold the cup, I'm going to play around. I'm going to just press in with my fingers. And I have one finger on the inside that's kind of pressing out. And that's kind of interesting, right? And then I might also think about this top lip, and maybe I want it to be just a little convex. I tend to make my lips not so convex. So let's have some fun with this one. What do you think? I'm just going to pinch that lip so that becomes a nice user experience. So this is kind of weird, right? But it could be kind of fun. So I'm just going to play with it a little bit until I'm happy with the shape of it. I kind of want it to bubble out a little more right there. Yeah, so that's kind of funny and weird, but it's a tumbler, right? So consider all the creative possibilities with your tumblers and cups. So another way potters use the wheel to make visually interesting cups is by the inclusion of thrower's marks. And so that comes by playing with the speed of the wheel and the speed of your hands. So I've thrown this cup form, and you can see it's pretty similar, just a nice tapered form. And now I'm going to include some thrower's marks with it. So for this, I'm going to get the wheel spinning at kind of a slow speed, and I'm going to move my hands faster than what the wheel is spinning. And it's going to make a spiral up the cup. And so I've got my hands in, I'm using my fingers, and I'm going to be doing a pulling motion. So I'm going to be applying a lot of pressure, but moving faster than the wheel is turning. So here we go. And now you can see I've got this spiral kind of going up the cup. And that's what we call using the thrower's marks to make a visually interesting cup. So as you're throwing your cups, consider what all the different tools can do. For example, if I want to define the rim of this cup, I might use actually my wooden rib. And if I just gently drag it into the cup there, you can see I've made a line, and that's going to define the lip for me. And so that can be something to play with, right? For example, if I have that at the top, maybe I want something similar towards the bottom. There we go. And now there's some similarity between the top and the bottom, right, with the repetition of that line. Now, something else you can think about, I know I said never touch the clay off the wheel, but since you're experienced with the wheel and why we have that rule, we can go ahead and start thinking about breaking it. All right. So I might think about, and actually I think I'm going to put another little line right in here. Just see how I'm breaking up the sections of the forms, kind of playing with this cup idea. All right, so I've got this little border that I've put in there. And so now I'm going to try stretching the clay a little bit off the wheel. So I'm just using a hand on the inside. I'm just going to use my finger to stretch the clay just a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So you can see how the clay is starting to stretch. And you know, I could leave it sort of an oval shape if I wanted, but actually what I'm going for is a square. So I'm just going to play with stretching the clay out. To get the shape that I want. There we go. And that looks sort of interesting, doesn't it? Now you can play with how you stretch the clay, right? How far is too far? Maybe you would put in, I don't know if these really count as facets, but where you would put in the facets. All right, just going to touch that up. And that looks pretty good to me. So this project is a chance for you to really start exploring your artistic vision and your creative voice with your pottery. Remember, you're always thinking about how the cup is to use, but there's a lot of potential within all the different ways you can alter the contours, right? The outer contours or silhouette of your cups and tumblers on the wheel.